Jack, this is theoretical bullshit once again. I've been gone for like a week or so. Sorry about that. I haven't posted any videos, but it's been work stuff, and now I'm done with it, and I have a few hours, so I am going to reply to Gays, Atheists, Faith, and Virtue. Okay, you said a lot of stuff, and it was like a 13-minute video, so I'm going to sort of like pick and choose here and be selective about what it is I'm going to respond to. I have notes, for which I'm very proud of myself. But let's go to, you talked about your history and coming to a belief in God, and you said that there was a point where you knew you had faith in God, you knew that you believed in some kind of God, but you then needed to make a decision as to which God that was, and so you started studying. You looked into Christianity, and you looked into Islam, and I'm not sure, you didn't really name names, I don't know which religions or philosophies you studied or looked into, but you said that ultimately Christianity ended up being the most logical and rational of all the religions. Given that you already believed in God, Christianity seemed to have the most logical, rational representation of God, I suppose. So my question for that is, what was it about Christianity that seemed more logical and rational than other religions that also subscribe to, the belief in a God? And by that, I can only conceive of three really real possibilities. One would be that Christianity is more consistent with reality and what we know empirically, what we know about the world and what we know of science and what we do have available to us that is verifiable. So there's that. Or Christianity is more consistent with itself, meaning it's a much tighter, coherent worldview, like it doesn't have any contradictions, and versus, I would assume maybe the other ones you believe do, so that would be maybe another one. Or maybe you talked a little bit about the human experience, and you talked about your own experiences and how, you've had religious experience that, have nothing to do with science and can't be explained by science and can't be explained, and it's only, it's completely personal to you. So maybe the third option is that you believe Christianity is the most logical and rational because it is the most consistent with your own experiences, with your own human experience. You don't really go into a whole lot of detail about what the human experience is, but you basically say that it's not explainable by science. And I'd like to hear more about what specifically your human experience was. Maybe you and I could take the same experience, like if you were to tell me what that experience is, I don't know, but I think you're operating under the assumption that it is contrary to science or can't be explained by science, whereas I might take that same experience in my life and believe that it can be explained by science. Even if it hasn't been explained by science, or even if I don't know the answer right away, I think the difference between the human experiences of yourself and myself would be that I operate under the premise that it is explainable by science. Maybe it hasn't been explained yet. And you operate under the assumption that it will never be explained by science, and that it's breaking scientific laws, and that it's completely impossible. So I just had that thought, and I thought that might be interesting, and I wonder what you think about that. Okay, then you went on to, you asked me about the statement I made about nature being greater than myself, and you wanted me to explain that. I think you might be reading more deeply into it than you need to. When I talk about nature being greater than myself, first of all, let me just say that I'm definitely all for reason and rationality and logic and things being provable and observable and testable, and I believe that there is an absolute truth out there independent of my consciousness. But when it comes to words like greater, better, good, bad, I don't believe that those are objective terms. I think they're very much in the eye of the beholder. And so to say that something is greater than yourself, I think, is definitely an opinion statement, not a fact statement, or even a belief statement. It's completely subjective, and it's interpretable. So I think the virtue comes in not necessarily being able to prove or observe something greater than yourself, but just to believe, to assume that there are things greater than yourself, whether or not you can prove that or verify that. When I say that nature is greater than myself, I mean literally that if you believe in a secular universe, if you believe that there's no God and that, it's it's all just matter and energy in different formations and different combinations, then you believe that we're all made of the same stuff. Atoms and protons and neutrons and electrons, and I'm made of the same stuff as the sun and a tree and a dog, and you're made of the same stuff as me, and so if I were to take that into account and know that I am just a couple trillion atoms in the billions and billions and trillions of infinite amounts of atoms out there, then it would be logically inherently true that that nature is greater than myself, insofar as I am only a fraction of what nature is. If you were to look at a blade of grass and then put that blade of grass next to a million other blades of grass, you would look at the collectiveness of all those blades and you would call that a lawn. And I think anyone would infer that a lawn is greater than a single blade of grass, and that's where I'm coming from. I think that the reason you and I would both agree that believing in something greater than yourself is a virtue is because it's a display of humility. And if literally it takes believing in, an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-perfect, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent being to conceive of something greater than your own self, that's the opposite of a virtue. That's not a virtue at all. If you believe that if it goes God then man, God then me, and there's nothing in between. Even if I were theistic, and I believed in God, I would still believe that there were many things in the world that were greater than myself, before I got to God. Even in just given that it's in the eye of the beholder, in society, in culture, like maybe I can't prove it and I can't verify it and I can't test it, but I know many people in my life. I've met men and women who I believe are greater men and women than myself. I believe government is greater than myself. I believe, like I said, I believe nature as a whole is greater than myself. And so I think why it's important is because it's a display of humility, and as long as you have that, it doesn't take believing in an omnipotent, all-powerful God to practice that kind of humility, and so that was my point. Okay, faith. You laughed at me saying that faith isn't a valid means of determining truth from error. I'm not sure what exactly it was about that struck you, and you said those were very loaded words or something like that. But I mean literally that faith isn't a valid means of determining truth from error. Now, I don't think that anyone, I would hope that nobody thinks that faith is a means of coming to a conclusion, a means of finding things out, or a means of making a decision. The whole point of faith is that you make the decision, you choose what it is you want to believe in, and then you put faith in that. But faith isn't a tool for process of elimination. Faith isn't a tool for logical steps. Faith is it's a blanket that you place over what it is you've already decided to believe. And I think that's inherently true. If you disagree, I'd really like to know how you believe that faith is a means of any means at all of determining correct from incorrect, or finding things out, such as logic is, such as mathematics is, such as science has its own methodology for doing the same thing. If you're placing faith in that category with those things, I'd like to know what that is. Okay, so I'm coming up on 10 minutes on this thing, and I didn't want to, but I'm going to have to divide this into two parts, so I'll get back to you on the second one.